You're listening to the Murphology Podcast. Thanks for tuning in to the Murphology Podcast, aka Murph here to share interviews about biking experiences from cyclists who have pedaled to places all over. Each week, we will get to know new people and explore new destinations to ride your bike. As you listen to these adventures, you may wonder, why haven't I done that yet? Anna Abrams is on the show today, self-described as sporty but not outdoorsy. In 2021, Anna tackled RAGBRAI, a 7-day bicycle tour and camping event where cyclists pedal across the state of Iowa in the heat and humidity that summer brings. She wanted insight on what exactly she had signed up for, so she created a Facebook group called RAGBRAI Newbies with the hope she could spark conversation with strangers and answer some of the questions she had as a first-timer. This private group grew quickly with friendly fellow first-timers along with seasoned athletes who had done the ride before. Anna quickly learned doing an event solo did not mean she was alone. She shares a bit about completing a long-distance tour successfully for the first time. She did it even though she broke her elbow just weeks before the event. Anna will be coming back for her second RAGBRAI in 2022, and she's so excited to continue to keep the RAGBRAI Newbies Facebook group going. It's such a good resource for this year's new round of newbies. So here's Anna. All right, well, on the show today we have Anna Abrams. Hey, Anna.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Yeah, we're recording this episode in the heart of winter, and I live in Iowa, and I do have a fat bike, so I do get outside a lot in the wintertime, but man, it's like single digits right now. And so it's hard to even think about what it's like to be in a 90-degree tent in July on RAGBRAI. How about you?
Yeah, it's funny. I almost am like craving that when I can barely walk to my car in the snow now. And then I know in July, I'll be like, what was it like to be cold?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And even though, I get older, we all get older each year, I somehow forget, every time I'm like, -3, what? And I don't even know, like, I have this weird dilemma with inside my head, like, it's going to be cold, put on your jacket and go.
Right. Well, I always think, people dread the winter here in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And I always think to myself, gosh, it's only a few days, like -7. Who cares? You just stay. And it's like now that it's here, I'm like, how do people live in this? It is terrible,
Yes, it is
It's
so
not
true.
terrible. I should say it's manageable. But,
yeah, exactly.
It's a surprise every year, even though it happens every year.
Right. Well, you are on the podcast because you started a super cool Facebook page called RAGBRAI Newbies, and it's not officially connected with RAGBRAI, but you're catering to people who are doing RAGBRAI for the first time. And so it has gained so much popularity. I'm hoping that you can tell us a little bit about it and where that vision came to be. And before we get to that, I want to find out, you hinted that you're in Minnesota. So will you tell us a little bit about where you are and what cycling is like there?
Well, sure. So I'm in Minneapolis in the city, and cycling is a big deal here. I mean, people are so excited. People are so sporty. And even when let's say I'm looking outside 8 to 10 inches of snow, I mean, people are biking all the time. It's definitely a good time place. In blizzards, people are cross-country skiing to dinner at night. I mean, it's a sporty place. I, however, I'm inside on my trainer all winter for sure. I'm not a winter cyclist at all.
And if I recall from interviewing other people that are from the Minneapolis or the Twin City area, you have a really cool infrastructure of bike trails or pedestrian trails, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think it's got to be one of the best in the country. It's there for you everywhere. And it's accessible from everywhere. People use it a lot. It's unending. I mean, there are loops, there are along expansive, way out into the suburbs and back. I mean, it's a great place to live if you are into running or biking or any of it.
Awesome. And that brings me to my next question. You said that in the wintertime, you're typically on your trainer where it's probably a nice 70 some degrees and you can, put the fan on if you want. But when you're outside, whether it's spring, summer, fall, what sort of terrain do you spend most of your time biking on?
I really like paved trails.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there aren't very many distractions. It's mostly smooth. They're usually really good long distances. And I can just zone out and I kind of meditate a bit. I mean, it's just a nice, quiet, long ride. I'm only on roads if I have to be, really. And I'm only on highways if it's RAGBRAI.
When it's, I guess technically, the roads aren't closed down for RAGBRAI, but they are, warned ahead of time. Like, you probably don't want to be on the highway when you're in a vehicle during this week.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into RAGBRAI Newbies. And as I mentioned earlier, it's a Facebook group that you started, I think, last year, but you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. But tell us the story on how that came to be.
Well, I felt like I needed something more interactive than just sort of a question and answer forum.
Mm-hmm.
I learn better through conversation. Like, why did you choose that helmet? Why do you like that snack? I guess I wanted a little more personality and conversation around this like huge thing ahead of me. And it turns out our page reflects that really well.
Yeah.
It's a really good place to land. We have so many seasoned writers who know this event like the back of their hand. They have so many amazing answers, and newer writers who understand all the new questions and first ride jitters. And we all just help each other out.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's become successful because, first of all, people in general are so nice to each other and they want to help each other, which just makes it, I think, makes us all feel comfortable kind of being there and asking questions and sort of mentioning things we're worried about.
Yeah, and doing RAGBRAI for the first time, obviously everyone listening to this podcast knows what RAGBRAI is, but it's 7 days of being on your bicycle. And to me, it's not something that you can just pull the bike off of the hook in the garage, dust it off, and go. I mean, it requires a little bit of training, both physically and mentally, in my opinion. And not to mention that a lot of people, most people, I mean, it's a camping event. So most people are biking all day long in heat and humidity. And then somehow they've got to go to bed on the ground and get up the next day and do it again and repeat 7 times and then go home to your friends and say, that was a blast. I loved it.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a funny thing to have to describe. I mean, people roll their eyes like, yeah, right. And when I first heard about it, I think I probably did the same. I was like, no, I love long biking, like a whole day, sure.
Yeah.
But then you go into your bed. I mean, what are you laying on the ground? Like, are you kidding me?
Right.
What's cool about this group is that people have different sort of hangups and questions and worries. Some people are just really worried about fuel and hydration and what should I eat? What if what if I don't feel good? What if I'm dehydrated?
Mm-hmm.
And they ask those questions a lot, and that is their main thing. And some people are really worried about camping or about, bike fit. I mean, it's so cool that we're all coming with really anything that we need to talk about.
Right.
And
so before you started this Facebook group, have you had experience in doing multi-day long-distance rides in the past?
The answer is yes, but it was when I was 15 and my social studies class, I think, I guess the teacher was into cycling and created this little group. And over the summer, 8 of my classmates went biking around Wisconsin, I think. I mean, it was so random. I'm from St. Louis. The whole thing is such a funny story because it's so unlike me to do something like this. But I think it was 2 weeks, and we camped and we biked. I don't remember much about it except that I couldn't believe I did it at the end.
Right.
But other than that, definitely not multi-day. I mean, long day-long rides. A lot, but always back to the comfort of my shower and my bed.
Right. Sure. Right.
In fact, I'll tell you where I came up with why I wanted to do RAGBRAI.
Yeah.
I did a really long bike ride one day, and the next day, I guess I did another. And I told my friend who's from Iowa, I'd love to bike and have like a hard, challenging day, and then maybe like stay in a hotel and take a shower and have like a really great meal and a good night's sleep and then get up and do it again. Like I came up with this idea, wouldn't this be great? As if I was the first person to think of it. And she said, well, it's kind of like RAGBRAI. And I was like, what? Tell me about it. And she said, it's exactly the same. And she kept talking. I was so excited. And then later found out that we're camping. We're like laying on the ground at night looking at the stars. I was like, that was a big difference for me. But right. I remember I wanted the feeling of like a multi-day adventure where you're just kind of without the comforts, without some of the comforts, I guess, of being at home.
And spoiler alert, you don't have to sleep on the ground if you don't want to, which I know we'll get into, because I have, if memory serves me right, you did not sleep on the ground, but don't tell me yet, okay?
Okay.
Can you tell us about like some highlights of your 2021 RAGBRAI?
Yeah, well, so my RAGBRAI was colored big time by the fact that I fractured my elbow 12 days before it. I mean, I wouldn't let myself be devastated because, there's a ton of training, a ton of excitement, and this group was just fun to sort of talk to almost every day.
But I will tell you, I was devastated for you because, the RAGBRAI, the Facebook group was well underway. Everyone's all excited. What did you say, 12 days before RAGBRAI? Yeah. And then you're like, oh my God. And I was like, had to catch my breath. I'm like, what is she going to do?
No. It was like the 12 weirdest days of my life because I was so absolutely definitely going to ride no matter what anyway. I mean, and I'm not like that. I'm a pretty reasonable, realistic person. And my husband was rolling his eyes. I mean, everybody was like, you've got to be kidding me. But I don't know. I just like floated through those days. I saw the orthopedic surgeon who works on the Vikings here in Minnesota. And I told him, listen, man, you got to get me out on the road. I've got 12 days. This is my Super Bowl.
Right.
I mean, come on. I pretty much forced him to give me the okay. I mean, I'm not kidding you. He actually physically rolled his eyes at me and was like, okay, this is going to be hard. You're not going to be able to ride. Go ahead. You can't break it any more than it's broken.
Oh, man.
And I was like, great, let's just see if I can. And here's the weirdest part. I was so prepared. Everything, I mean, I was packing for days. I was looking at the route. I was ready, but I woke up the first morning in the Mars, packed up my stuff, got on my bike, and realized I have not even tried riding my bike since I broke my elbow.
Oh, no.
Like, it didn't even occur to me to get on got on my bike, like, what if I can't ride at all? How did I not try this first? I mean, it was the weirdest feeling, like, oh boy, so I got on and I went. I mean, I think I held my breath for like a mile.
Oh,
just
man.
was like, and eventually you're just on a road and there you are and you just go. I mean, that's RAGBRAI.
And you did it, right?
Yeah, I did it.
Wow.
The hardest part was getting on and off my bike. I mean, the first time I had to get off at the first stop, I was like, this might just end the whole thing. I mean, it was really hard. But when you're riding, I could kind of lean on my right hand mostly. People came up behind me like, what is this position you're in? And I was like, well, you can only use one arm.
Wow. And then did you camp on the ground or were you?
I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, gosh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
I was in a charter. I was in Pork Belly. I'm a sporty person, but I'm not an outdoorsy person at all. So biking 84 miles is great, right up my alley, but putting up a tent is not. So I'm glad that I was with a charter that was really helpful. I could kind of indulge in the comforts of having food and showers and tent set up,
right,
which was really important to me for my first year and for my issue with my elbow.
Right. And the nice thing about RAGBRAI is, you get registered, and with that registration, you can put your gear onto a huge semi, and that semi will take your gear to the next overnight town. So you have that already worked into your registration, but if you have the funds and you want to, you can glam it up as much as possible where, did you have them put your tent up for you each day?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I considered, I mean, for like a split second, I thought maybe I can do it myself. But I just thought after, a million miles and the heat and the humidity and, whatever else, I just wanted it to be ready for me. And my gosh, I mean, thank God I did. I could literally not have done it with one arm. I mean, that would have just been the worst.
Wow.
I'm surprised that people ask a lot in our Facebook group, how do I transport things from place to place? And people are so relieved that RAGBRAI is so helpful. If you're not with a charter, people are so relieved to hear that RAGBRAI hosts you around as much as they do.
Right, yeah. And it's a well-oiled machine. Here we are at RAGBRAI, 49 years will be in 2022. So they have figured it out, and it's just amazing. They even get down to the time. So if you drop off your gear at 6:15 in the morning, you can, when you get into town, the next town, you can just go look for 6:15 a.m. and find your bag that way. So it's pretty cool.
That is so cool. I love that.
Yeah. Although having somebody put my tent up would be pretty sweet too. So the charters are awesome.
Well, I like to say that I've camped 3 times in my life. Once was RAGBRAI, and the other 2 times were on the living room floor of my parents' house. So I'm probably not someone who wants to try putting up a tent by myself.
That is so awesome.
Kind of a no-brainer for me.
Oh my God. You're a perfect example of, people that want to do RAGBRAI, but say they're athletic, but they're not outdoorsy. Boom. You know how to do it.
Yeah.
So going into RAGBRAI, I was lucky enough to get to meet you because as part of the Facebook group, you set up kind of a meet and greet on day 0 at the expo so that people would feel a little bit more, maybe confident in themselves, like, okay, I do know a few people. But did you know anyone going into RAGBRAI?
I did. Well, I met a small handful of Minneapolis riders through our little group. We trained together a little bit here. But I will tell you, getting to know people in that group and then meeting them in person at the expo it made me feel like I knew everyone. Yeah. It was a big deal. I was so excited to ride with all my new friends. I mean, it was neat. I barely knew anyone. I think I knew 3 people whose faces I'd ever seen.
And I think, saying that you went there and didn't really know anybody is completely different beginning of the week versus end of the week. Because even though you might not know people's names, it's an interesting dynamic. I don't know if you experience this, but if you kind of always get up at the same time and get on your bike at the same time every day, you start to see the same people every day, which is sometimes is mind-blowing when you think 15,000 people are on their bikes, and there's that guy that I talked to yesterday in the line to get a sandwich.
I had that exact experience, like the first 3 stops on the first day. I saw my friend Craig 3 times, and it was just, first of all, I thought, how is this, like, how does this happen? Because am I just going to see the same people over and over again? But I was surprised at sort of how well that hosts you along, that you have the comfort of this, you're right, this like handful of people that are sort of at the same pace or get up at the same time. And yet you have, several thousand other people that if you veer off and do something else, you've got a whole other group of people to meet.
And we talked a little bit about this via social media, you and I did, but there's a difference between being alone and being solo. Do you want to touch a bit on that?
What I really liked, so I went solo. I mean, I drove down with a friend and then I just did the whole ride solo. What I liked about it is that nobody influenced my pace or my ride. I wanted this experience to be 100% my own, not changed by someone else's needs. If I wanted to take an extra long break in a town, I could stay there as long as I wanted, or skip a town altogether if I wanted to. Jump into an experience in a town, or just chill by myself, I guess, on someone's lawn, which I did a lot. That independence was really valuable to me. But when you're laying on a lawn and you're exhausted, you turn to your left and there's another guy laying next to you and you talk for 20 minutes. Right. Or, you meet someone at like the slushy stand and there's your friend for dinner the next night. Like, you're alone, but you're just not alone.
Yeah.
I think people should not be afraid to ride solo because you just are with everyone who wants to help and be friendly.
Right. And you can pick and choose when you want to be engage in conversation or when you don't want to be. So that's like the best part of RAGBRAI is you do it your way.
Absolutely. I really specifically liked writing alone because if I didn't want to hinder anyone else's experience if they needed a longer rest, or if I needed a longer rest and they were sort of like itching to go. That was important to me, that everybody just sort of, because some days you have a ton of energy and you're so eager to get to the next town. And some days you just need to give yourself a major break. And since that's so specific and individual, it meant a lot to me to protect that.
Yeah. I will say to anybody that's listening that's done RAGBRAI multiple times or wants to do RAGBRAI multiple times, is there's no rules as far as what you do each year. And I think I'm a perfect example because I've done RAGBRAI where I'm fully self-contained, meaning I leave my house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, pedal all the way to the RAGBRAI start town, pedal to the end of RAGBRAI, and then pedal home. Like, I have all my stuff with me and
So cool.
I go at my own pace. I have been doing RAGBRAI long enough that I'm pretty much any town I go into, I'm going to see somebody I know. And then you can spark a conversation and then stay with them if you want or move on. But then I've also, used a team bus or a charter or, using the RAGBRAI service. Like, it's the best part about RAGBRAI is you're all biking across the state, but everybody's doing it however they want to.
Yeah, it's truly that way. It really is. I don't know that there's another big thing like this that we can do in life that is so organized and supportive and ready for us, and yet we can do whatever we want with it.
Yeah. Okay, so with that said, anything memorable worth mentioning to the listeners?
There are a couple things that really stand out to me that I kind of think about all the time. First of all, this newbie meetup at the expo was just so much fun. I mean, I was there for, 3 hours, sort of getting to know Iowa for the first time. And this meetup was ahead of us. And a friend of mine, we met, I guess, at our tents or something, and walked to the expo and walked around a little bit. And then all of a sudden, there were a ton of people who were like really excited to be there together, like instant friends, instant community. And that feeling of like, oh, here I am. Like we've arrived here together. Here we go. That feeling was like such an introduction. I thought that was really a good feeling.
Yeah. And in the amount of time I was there at that same meetup, you could feel the nervous energy quickly transform into excitement energy.
Yeah. I mean, what a great feeling to have, I mean, being sort of anticipating it for so many months and then having that moment. Yeah, I agree with you. That's how it felt. Another memorable, a moment that had to do with camping was actually something that really sticks out to me. As I'm sure you can imagine, just camping is just not in my wheelhouse. I was far more worried about camping, to be honest, than I was about any of the mileage.
Oh, wow.
So like, forget about doing it all one-handed, which was painful and very annoying, but just like the stickiness, the heat, the humidity, like, I don't know. It's just, I wasn't sure how I would handle it. And after the second or third night of really struggling in my tent, it all just sort of came together. I sort of just like relaxed into it. And I was like, look, this is how, I had to dump my bag out every night, just dump it out, and everything went everywhere. In the morning, I just stuff everything back in, which is not how I do things. I mean, I am usually a little more reasonable than that. So one night I just thought, this is how it's going to be. And I thought, I think I've got this. I think I've got all of this. I think I've got it all. Like, this is me doing it. Here I am. And I sent a picture to my husband, like, look, here I am camping and I'm cool with it. And the ride is fine. I'm cool with it. And my smile is so big. And I know what that picture means to me. Just a moment of like kind of conquering something. And whether it's the camping part or the biking part or whatever else happens to you on RAGBRAI, there's a moment when you feel like you're kind of in it.
Yeah.
I remember coasting down a really big hill into Cherokee the first day, seeing hundreds of us all sort of greeting each other, having our first snacks. There was like big music. And I just remember, I want to do this for a week for sure.
That's awesome. And after you completed RAGBRAI, like, do you brag that you're a camper now?
I say I'm never going to camp again until RAGBRAI next year.
Oh, perfect.
That's exactly right. In fact, that was the first thing most people asked, not how was RAGBRAI. They said, so did you camp? I did, and I'm never going to do it again until July 25th next year.
And I will say,
it's not terrible. It just is not in my wheelhouse.
Right. Well, and it's Iowa, right? So sometimes, I went through a couple years where I can't remember what I had that showed the temperature, and I had to get rid of it because you'd wake up in your tent, you're like, it's 83 in my tent. I'm sweating. I hate this. So I got rid of that, whatever that was. Gosh, I can't remember what it was because it's mind over matter. Like, you can't get away from it. So just like what you did, you just are like, all right, here I am and I'm having fun. But what I was going to point out is that people listening that are like, I am just like Anna, I do not want to camp. There are options, especially if you have the funds to do it, where you can jump in with a charter that offers air conditioning. They will take you to a hotel. You might have to go to a different town because some of the towns are so small, but you can do RAGBRAI any way you want.
I know someone who went to hotels every night, and she really liked that. Mm-hmm. Despite me not liking camping, I still would have chosen camping just because I felt so connected to like all the bodies around me. Like you sort of walk around, everybody's there. But she really liked it. It was the perfect way to do RAGBRAI for her. Mm-hmm. And I know she slept really well and took really great hot showers. And I thought that was just a great example of that. It was exactly what she needed.
Mm-hmm. When you think about your first RAGBRAI, I think people have figured out, if they're on the RAGBRAI website, that there's food every 2 feet from you. I mean, you can eat all day long if you want, but any favorite foods along the route?
I couldn't believe how much food there was. Right. Like, no kidding. I mean, really, like before you're finished chewing the one thing, you ride 1 mile and there's like somebody offering a ton of stuff. Yeah. I really love watermelon. So I brought my own little shaker. I don't know if you've had Tajin, like Mexican spice.
On the watermelon?
It goes really well on watermelon. And so I brought my own little shaker and I met a lot of friends that way. I was like, listen, can I give you some tea? Which sounds kind of weird, I guess. If you meet up with me next year, I'll bring it and everybody will love it, I swear. But I loved watermelon. My favorite vendor was this peanut butter and jelly stand of all things. It was sweet. It was warm. It was like so comforting. And being pickle juice was a weird, new, helpful thing.
Yes. Yeah. That's where I learned to really, really like pickle juice, was from RAGBRAI Pass.
Super helpful. Mm-hmm. It took me it took some coercing from other people. Like, you've got to try it. It'll be really helpful. And when I did, I was like definitely hooked. Yeah.
It's, the cool thing about RAGBRAI is that a lot of the vendors will go on route every day. So if you miss, whatever, you see it, I want to stop there, but the line's too long, you can wait till the next day and they'll probably be somewhere along the route and you can, jump into the line or take some more time or check them out another day.
I thought that was really helpful. Mm-hmm. Also, yes.
And there's actually some of the vendors that have been around for a long time will post signs and say, last day today, or we'll be 3 miles ahead. So you can almost plan in your mind, like, oh, I am kind of hungry, but I'm going to wait 3 more miles and go to, insert great stand.
Yeah.
So if you think about all the stuff that you brought, how you said you threw everything in a bag and then every day you have to dump it, and, I don't know how organized you ended up being by the end of the week, but were there any changes that you knew you had to make for 2022 RAGBRAI?
Well, I do think that using both hands will be totally different experience, honestly. I mean, I think that should really feel like my first time. Yes. I'll tell you one change I would definitely make. Well, first of all, I'm a relatively organized person, so I think it'll just be a lot calmer in my tent to be able to actually unpack and sort of set everything up. But something that surprised me was that I like that everybody uses these big Ziploc bags for each day's kit. And so all you really have is one choice to make. You open it and you put it all on. But I think next year I'm going to use like cloth bags or net bags for clean clothes, and then Ziplocs for sweaty clothes, because the humidity and like the heat made it so hard for me to deal with all this plastic. Like it stuck together and it was hard to unzip. I don't know. To me, that was a little challenging. So I think to keep the humidity down, like in my bag, I think I'll probably use cloth bags to divide everything. Otherwise, I felt like I was really prepared. I don't think I brought too much or too little. I really analyzed like all of these. It was so helpful to hear everyone's packing lists. I mean, by, end of June, middle of July, the packing lists are all over the Facebook page. And I really dug into them and decided what I would want, what would be helpful. And I think that set me up for a lot of success that way.
Yeah. And back to, everybody does RAGBRAI different. Like some people are okay wearing the same kit, day after day, rinsing it off in the shower or not even washing it. I don't know. I am not one of those people. So I like to have, fresh, clean clothes to wear every single day. Even though sometimes, you take a shower and then you crawl in your tent and then you immediately start sweating. So it's an unending battle of fighting weather. But again, you can do everything how you want to do as far as RAGBRAI goes. But yeah, it is nice to see how everybody else does things.
Yeah. And if you have several choices to make from other people's opinions, you can kind of make your own easier, I think. So you kind of fish through and decide what works for you, and there's your answer. It doesn't have to be anybody else's way.
I guess I made the assumption, but you are coming back for RAGBRAI 2022, right?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
It's so much fun to have something so big, so far on the horizon to look forward to.
Yeah.
The energy in the Facebook group is already ramping up. So I think this spring and summer training will be extra exciting as we all train sort of together,
Right. Yeah. And I assume that virtual RAGBRAI will be coming back at some level. I'm not sure exactly how, but that's always fun too, just to see everybody else on social media saying, I got my virtual miles in, which sometimes those virtual miles are outside or inside. It's just kind of getting excited about the actual RAGBRAI.
I love that there's that option. That's great.
Yeah. Was there anything that really, besides the fact that you had a broken elbow and so you were definitely hindered in how you normally would be on RAGBRAI, but anything that surprised you about your first RAGBRAI?
I was surprised at how welcome I felt. It was this huge group of strangers, but I didn't feel lost in this group. I felt connected somehow all the time. And there's a lot of, as big as it is, there's a lot of familiarity that happens quickly and often. Like we said, seeing the same people, seeing the same vendors. It feels like one big day times 7 versus like a week of everything being a surprise, sort of. I don't know if that makes sense. I was surprised at how welcome I felt for sure. And my attitude surprised me. I mean, I maybe didn't totally surprise me, but I thought RAGBRAI was a way to really engage some of my fears and my doubts and a lot of my discomforts, and I really love a challenge like that. And I was surprised that I trusted myself so much and just went with it. It turned into kind of a magical week.
And to do it solo. I mean, that's huge that, you kind of take on, and I don't mean you specifically, but when a person takes on a challenge like that, like I'm just going to go pack up and ride my bike across Iowa by myself. And then you realize, A, you're not by yourself, and that B, there are so many other people doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to people that are deciding to do RAGBRAI for their first time?
The first thing I would say here is that I asked this question in our Facebook group, and I advise anyone to go check it out. We have over 100 super helpful answers there.
Wow.
How to manage the prep and managing the ride, the whole thing. So there is a great trove of advice for sure. My advice to a newbie would be, maybe you shouldn't think of RAGBRAI as some Herculean adventure. It's really, like we kind of said, it's just several 10-ish mile rides clumped together. And then all of a sudden you're on the other side of Iowa and you can't believe it's over. It is a lot smaller than it looks from the beginning, I'd say. The advice that comes from my own experience would be to jump in and trust the system. Trust the people, trust the plan. I think RAGBRAI isn't only made for sporty people and big time cyclists and campers and partiers. I think RAGBRAI is made for the people who want to do it. It's there for you. If you really want to do it, you can do it.
And hopefully the people of Iowa welcome everyone who decides to do it.
Oh, I felt very welcome. People were so excited to have us. That was such a fun thing.
That's awesome.
Actually, here's another thing I would definitely say to newbies. If you think you understand fueling and hydration, you should also dig into it even more, because sharpening that up, it can be a huge help. I learned that the hard way for sure.
Yeah, I can really, really feel dehydration, especially the next day. So if you go to bed and you're like, well, I don't really want to drink a lot of water before I go to bed because I don't want to have to get out of my tent and go to the bathroom, you are you're setting yourself up for failure for the next couple of days. So, and that's just a tiny example, but yeah, you are so right. Food and nutrition it doesn't mean you have to you can still eat a greasy burger if you want, but you have to be mindful of how many calories you need.
Yes, for sure.
And you mentioned that it's unbelievable that you had over 100 comments about the question, what advice would you give newbies? So tell the listeners where they can go if they want to be on this Facebook group.
We are RAGBRAI Newbies on Facebook.
Nice.
It's easy. I think it must be easy to find. Request to join. It's a private group because we sort of get into stuff just about kind of what we need and where we are and what we're doing. You request to join, you answer 2 questions, make sure you answer the questions, and then scroll around and see what everybody's saying.
I think it's a great resource. And even for me, I've done RAGBRAI almost 30 times, probably more than 30 times. And it's still a great resource because there's always something someone's going to say that you're like, oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah. I think it must be it must be neat to have the perspective of somebody who's done this so many times and still learning something, like you said, from the group, or just kind of hearing what everybody's worried about this year, or what people's questions are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And wait till the route's out. Then we'll really, we'll find out who the people who are super interested in the actual terrain, because they'll give us all kinds of, they'll be like, okay, on this day, you're going to have all kinds of elevation, so we can kind of get prepped for stuff like that.
Wow, I haven't thought about that. No kidding. That'll be interesting.
Yeah,
that'll be helpful.
Yeah. So RAGBRAI isn't until July. So any other bike adventures on your horizon and before RAGBRAI?
I'm excited for the MS 150 in Minnesota this summer. It's a beautiful ride from Duluth down to the Twin Cities. Last year it was truncated to this little loop around a suburb, which was just not the experience I wanted necessarily. So that's exciting. And I heard Pork Belly may charter it. It's 2 nights. So that could be fun to just see everybody again that works with Pork Belly. And they were a great host. So I'm looking forward to that. I have a little list of rides to conquer on my desk. So when I'm looking out the window at feet of snow, I can daydream about summer rides and
perfect. Yeah.
Naps under trees. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, before we end this great conversation about RAGBRAI newbies, anything or anyone you want to plug?
Yes. Well, I would like to thank you, Kathy, for your podcast. It was such a great addition to my preparation and my mental sort of load about how I was handling all of this. There's a bit of one episode in particular that meant a lot to me. I don't remember which episode. I don't remember how long ago it was. You mentioned a quote from John Karas, and it's something like, what do we do if we're out there on the road between nowhere and nowhere and it starts to rain? Well, we'll probably get wet. And when the rain stops, if we haven't found shelter on a farmhouse porch or in a barn, we'll dry out. How many miles do we ride before stopping for meals and water? as many as we want to. How long will it take to ride 70 miles a day? Just as long as it takes. And this really spoke to me because, what do we do if it rains? What if I'm tired? What if I'm hot? What if my back hurts? I mean, these are big, real questions that I had, that people have. To me, this message is so basic and obvious. There are so many challenges to confront and work through on RAGBRAI and in life. And if you boil it down, I think we're capable of dealing with a lot of it kind of easily. It's a big lesson learned. And you dry off, you rest, you cool off, you stretch, you ice it, and you move on. And for some religious reason, you end up on the other side of Iowa. And you feel like $1 million, and that's RAGBRAI. And that part of your podcast meant a lot to me.
Oh, awesome. I am tickled that you felt that way. And, when I look at RAGBRAI, I think of it as it's one of the few times in your life that you really only have one focus, and that is get up, ride your bike, get to camp, rinse and repeat. Like, you don't have to, well, hopefully you don't have to log into your work email or, worry about the kids it's just a different atmosphere, I guess, to enjoy that doesn't happen very often.
I agree. I agree. It's unlike anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Anna, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and I hope people go check out RAGBRAI Newbies on the Facebook, because there is so much good information and just a great energy.
I agree. I'm so grateful to the very cool, sweet, funny, clever, smart, friendly people who go there so often, on almost every day, and really encourage each other and motivate each other. It makes this, I think, a whole lot different than if we didn't have it.
Agreed. All right. Well, we'll see you in July.
Thank you for having me.
Well, listeners, that's it for this week. Thank you so much, Anna, for coming on to talk about your experiences riding your bike across the state of Iowa solo, but with 15,000 other like-minded cyclists. If you are going to be coming to Iowa to ride your first RAGBRAI, look for the RAGBRAI Newbies Facebook group. It's full of questions you may have, along with answers to questions you didn't know you needed to ask. And find out more info on the Register's annual Great Bike Ride Across Iowa that I speak of so often by going to ragbrai.com. Email me at murphologypodcast@gmail.com if you have a topic or the name of a cyclist you find interesting. Support my podcast at patreon.com/murphology. High five to the newest Patreon members, Dan and Sean. Thanks, guys, for supporting my dream. Visit my Instagram page for daily entertainment, and check out my website for all kinds of bicycle stuff. And a quick shout out to Simmons Electric for sponsoring this episode. I'll leave you with this quote from the Unwritten Book of Murphology. This quote comes from B.B. King. The beautiful thing about learning is that nobody can take it away from you. Think about it.